Hi, class. Um, we're about ready to make a big U-turn. We have crossed the Atlantic and spent some time in both North and South America. There is definitely much more art than in the textbook. I don't think we did anything with the Pacific Northwest, and I don't think we did anything with the Aleutian cultures of the Eskimos either, but they're beautiful art forms. If you ever get to visit Glendale Community College, go to the library. And the library is actually, it's a combination of what it sounds like, a bunch of books, but it also has many, many visual art objects. So it's a museum as well. And it's a museum that is comprehensive. And there are what you would think would be in a museum, drawings and paintings, but there's also quite a few cultural artifacts from civilizations like the ones I just talked about, masks from the Pacific Northwest and ivory carving from Eskimo cultures. So that's at GCC at the library whenever you feel comfortable in making the trip, and make sure the library is open and available. So the big U-turn that we're making is we're going to cross the Atlantic again, and this time we're going to end up on the shores of the Mediterranean. Gosh, that's someplace where we've been before, Egypt. We're not going to go exactly to Egypt. What we're going to do is we're going to look at a section which is kind of near Egypt and kind of near Mesopotamia. And the chapter is chapter number 7, and it's about early Jewish and early Christian artworks. I am finding this to be a very interesting chapter because right now I'm reading a book about the Middle Ages. And the preface to the book talked an awful lot about the Hebrew Old Testament Bible and the coming of Christ and how the Christian church evolved. It was a very simple. At the beginning, the Christian brotherhood, not just for men, but for women as well, was a very simple faith that was based in loving your neighbor. As it got attention, it was embellished, and other forces tried to make Christianity something bigger and something more glorious than just simple teaching like love your neighbor. And like I say, this is the time period about 200 to 300 BC to 200 or 300 AD. So the birth, the life, the death of Jesus is that central type of point that we are on both sides of in this case. Many of you have expressed interest in trying to decipher what early Mesopotamian art, what early Jomon art, what early Olmec art stood for, and what kind of religion. And it was always in the realm of speculation. Now, when we get into this chapter, many of you are going to feel more grounded because the stories that the artwork talks about are stories that many of you, being living in a culture that has so many Christian people in it, and you don't have to be one of them, but you will hear the stories of the Bible, and all of a sudden in this chapter, it's going to be like, oh, that sounds familiar. I don't have to speculate on what that means because it's been part of the dogma of the church for 2,000 years. So this is kind of the beginning of the end of the class. And I don't want you to get excited about, oh, the class is ready to end. What I mean by that is that we have kind of been hop, skipping, and jumping around the world in order to validate the fact that humanity, wherever humanity was very creative and very inventive. But now we're going to start on a very well-traveled rut, a very well-traveled road, and that road is going to lead us from this exact time period, 200 BC to 300 AD. It's going to lead us right through European art, and then it's going to jump eventually. It's going to jump back into the New World, but that will be outside the domain of this particular class. You will have to sign up for ARH 102 to get that story. So where we're starting in chapter 7 is we're starting our run up to the Renaissance. It's going to take about 1,000 years. And there are some people who say this is the Dark Ages. And they're going to call it the Dark Ages because all of the science inquiry that we were so marveling at is going to, in a sense, be turned over to faith. And what's going to be very important for this 1,000 years is going to be not what's happening on earth, but what's happening in heaven and how you can get up to heaven. So people are going to be more concerned with interpreting the Bible. We'll be looking at Muslim cultures, interpreting all sorts of different religious writings. So early Christian, we're going to be looking in tombs, catacombs. I had the good fortune of being able to travel to Paris, and I wanted to see Notre Dame before the fire, thank goodness, and what a sad thing that was. But in the plaza, right outside the front of the church, there was what looked to me like the entrance to a subway. And it wasn't a subway, it was the catacombs. And you'd go down the stairs and you would walk through tunnels, and on either side of you there would be burials, and there would be skeletons, and there would be tombs, and there would be sarcophagus. And this whole idea of burying people in tunnels is going to be blossoming forth in this time period. And some of those underground areas were actually going to be used kind of like chapels. And so some of the early Christian churches are going to be meeting underground in these chambers. Here is a synagogue right here, and what this chapter is going to tell you is that the Roman Empire is disintegrating. The Roman Empire is not going to fall in one great big crashing event. The Roman Empire is going to kind of loosen everything up and fade away, but never disappear. And what's going to happen is that the early Jewish and early Christians are going to be borrowing, and as you can tell, you know, this looks like some of the interiors of the Roman homes that we looked at in Pompeii. So here's another, you'll be seeing this in your chapter, and it's the ceiling in one of the catacombs, but it's also a place of worship. And just like the Greeks, we cannot get away from architecture. I'll just kind of spoil it for you. We're going to end our run-up to the Renaissance and the International Gothic. And the International Gothic style is these glorious, wonderful, amazing buildings, cathedrals that are scattered all around Europe. And those cathedrals grew from an evolution, okay? And that evolution started in Rome. So this is Old St. Peter's right here. If you've been paying attention to your chapters on Roman architecture, you're going to say, I can't tell the difference. That is a Roman style building. And if we take it one step further, I want you to really pay attention to this section. You're going to say, my goodness, that is a basilica. That is of Roman design. It was an open meeting place where you could gather and you could either do political business or you could do commercial business. It was a big open hall, and now it's being adapted so that it will become a Christian place of worship. And they didn't care, you know, it's fine. Let's capitalize on Roman architecture, and then gradually over the next 1,000 years, as we go through the next few chapters, you'll see that it does change slowly. It becomes Romanesque, and then eventually it'll become Gothic. This is a church at Ravenna, and you're going to be introduced to what's called a central axis floor plan. Some of the churches had a T shape or a cross shape, and other Christian churches had a circular kind of a floor plan, and think back towards buildings kind of like the Greek, the Roman Pantheon for that. So we're going to quit popping around the world. It's been, that portion of this has been, every time I go through it, I learn more and more, and I'm very excited for the fact that there have been many of you who say, geez, this is expanding my horizons. I'm kind of learning some new stuff here, and some of you are even making what I call a web, and you're starting to connect from this corner of the world to that corner of the world, from this time period to that time period. And that is exactly what this class has the potential to do, and I'm so happy to see that it's starting to happen, that you're starting to build this web and find out that our little corner of Arizona is actually connected in a lot of different ways to people all around the world. So happy chapter 7. It is the beginning of the end of the class. We have a few more chapters to go through, and I think you're going to feel a little more grounded, because the stories that you'll be hearing about, the pictures that you'll be looking at, are going to remind you of some of the things that have become embedded in the American culture. So I'll sign off for now.